Hi everyone, it's Tuesday, March 24th, and today I have a poem by Margaret Atwood. And I was actually going to read a different poem, but then I put on my Handmaid's Tale shirt this morning and I thought, well, I have to read a poem by Margaret Atwood now. I love Margaret Atwood. I think she's amazing. As you might know, because I've told you, or you might assume because I have a t-shirt with the cover of her book on it. But I first learned about Margaret Atwood in high school. I read The Handmaid's Tale and loved it. I was just caught up with her language, the poetic beauty of how the way she writes, and that's in her fiction and also in her poetry. And she just writes about what it means to be a woman in the world. She writes speculative fiction like The Handmaid's Tale. She writes a lot about climate change. She's been writing for a really long time. I looked her up, and she's 80 years old right now. She's super active on Twitter. She's a feminist, a climate activist. She's just a really cool person, and she's doing a lot of good in the world. I got a chance to see her speak at the Boston Book Festival a few years ago, and she was so funny and charming, and she's just a really, really neat person. And so this poem today is called Spelling. And I don't think the poem itself is super famous, but it has a really famous line, which is a word after a word after a word is power. I actually have a poster of that up in my classroom behind my desk. One of my best friends got it for me a few years ago. And she writes this poem about the different ways that the words spell and spelling work. And I've been grading all of these Macbeth projects, so I've been thinking about the witches and spells, and all of that is in this poem too. And so it's a poem about the power of language and also about how that power can be used by people who have been oppressed and how important that is. And so here's the poem, Spelling by Margaret Atwood. My daughter plays on the floor with plastic letters, red, blue, and hard yellow, learning how to spell, spelling, how to make spells. I wonder how many women denied themselves daughters, closed themselves in rooms, drew the curtains so they could mainline words. A child is not a poem. A poem is not a child. There is no either or. However, I return to the story of the woman caught in the war and in labor, her thighs tied together by the enemy so she could not give birth. Ancestress, the burning witch, her mouth covered by leather to strangle words. A word after a word after a word is power. At the point where language falls away from the hot bones, at the point where the rock breaks open and darkness flows out of it like blood, at the melting point of granite where the bones know they are hollow, and the word splits and doubles and speaks the truth, and the body itself becomes a mouth. This is a metaphor. How do you learn to spell? Blood, sky, and the sun. Your own name first. Your first naming. Your first name. Your first word. So I like this poem because it helps me appreciate the power of language and my own experience with it, and how we can use language to reach out to each other even when we can't be close. So thanks everyone. Hope you have a great day.